My husband left a note. Don't look for me. I need freedom. So I didn't. I filed for divorce, froze the accounts, and took my kids to my sister's house. 10 months later, he was waiting outside my lawyer's office in tears. I, 38-year-old Rebecca Crawford, found the note on our kitchen counter, weighted down by his wedding ring. Not his house key, I noticed, but the ring itself, a deliberate, dramatic gesture. It was 4 sentences long, written in his hurried scrawl that always looked impatient. I need to be on my own for a while. This isn't working for me anymore. I need freedom. Don't look for me. No, I'm sorry. No, I love you, but... Just a clinical statement of departure. For a moment, I did nothing. I stood there in the silent kitchen, the scent of the coffee I'd made him still hanging in the air. My hands trembled as I read the note a second time, then a third. I looked around at the life we'd built together, the backsplash we'd argued over for weeks, the breakfast bar where Lily did her homework every night, Max's art projects still magneted to the refrigerator. It all felt like a stage set for a play that had just abruptly ended. There was no screaming, no throwing things. The grief was there, a cold, heavy stone in my gut that made it hard to breathe. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to beg him to come home, to promise I could change whatever had driven him away. But it was accompanied by something else, a strange, unnerving calm. Jim had always been the impulsive one, prone to dramatic gestures when things got difficult. In his grand exit, he'd forgotten the fundamental difference between us. He makes scenes, I make plans. I picked up my phone with shaking fingers. My first call was not to his mother or our mutual friends. It was to Patricia Wells, the most thorough family attorney I could find with a 5-star rating. She specialized in complex asset division and high-conflict custody cases. I booked an emergency appointment for that afternoon, my voice surprisingly steady as I explained the situation. My second call was to my bank. I explained that I suspected unauthorized access to our joint accounts. Not entirely a lie. Jim had moved $8,500 from our checking to his personal account the day before, something I'd noticed but hadn't questioned. They immediately flagged the accounts pending an in-person investigation. I had my own savings account he didn't know about, $45,000 I'd quietly built from my freelance graphic design work over the years. My independence fund started long before I'd ever imagined needing it. My third action was the hardest. I had to pick up the kids from school and somehow explain that their father had just blown up their world. Lily, 12, and Max, 9, climbed into the car chattering about their day, backpacks heavy with homework and art projects. I waited until we were in my sister Anne's driveway before I told them we'd be staying there for a while because Daddy needed some time to think about grown-up things. Lily's face went pale. "Is Daddy coming back?" she asked, her voice small. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, the honesty scraping my throat raw. "But whatever happens, you and Max are safe, and I love you both very much." Max, always the practical one, asked if he could bring his Legos. The normalcy of the question nearly broke me. I packed bags for all of us, my movements mechanical and efficient. I grabbed my laptop and the important documents from our home office, including tax returns and bank statements. I left Jim's belongings untouched, but secured everything financial. Then I drove back to Anne's house, the silence in the car no longer feeling like a void, but like an opportunity. I didn't look for him, he'd asked for freedom. I was giving it to him, with legal documentation. That night, lying in Anne's guest room with Max curled against my side and Lily in the trundle bed, I stared at the ceiling until dawn. My mind raced through 13 years of marriage, searching for signs I'd missed. The late nights he claimed were work meetings, the distance that had grown between us over the past year. His increasing criticism of my lack of ambition since I'd scaled back my design work to focus on the children. I'd thought I was being a good wife, a good mother. I'd thought we were building something together. The next morning, while the kids were at school, I returned to our house. Something felt different beyond Jim's absence. The shared computer in his office had been wiped clean. Browser history, downloads, everything. But Jim wasn't as tech-savvy as he thought. I found what I needed in places he'd forgotten to check. Credit card statements showed a pattern, hotel charges, dinner reservations for two, weekend trips I'd never taken. The name Monica Reeves appeared repeatedly on restaurant bills and as an emergency contact on his gym membership renewal. Monica Reeves, his assistant at Pinnacle Sales Solutions. The bubbly 32-year-old who'd organized the last 3 office parties and always asked about how the family was doing with just a little too much interest. I remembered her at the Christmas party, laughing at Jim's jokes a little too loudly, her hand lingering on his arm when she handed him drinks. The kids had mentioned her before. Dad's friend Monica, who bought them expensive Christmas gifts and knew their favorite candy. She'd sent Lily a designer purse for her birthday, something I'd found odd, but Jim had brushed off as just being nice to the boss's family. How naive I'd been. I methodically screenshotted everything, saved it to encrypted cloud storage, and emailed copies to Patricia. The timeline was damning. Hotel stays during my weekend art workshops, dinners on nights he claimed to be working late, charges at expensive boutiques for items I'd never received. One particularly painful discovery was a jewelry store receipt for a diamond bracelet purchased 2 weeks ago, on our anniversary. I'd spent that evening alone, thinking he'd forgotten. The grief was still there, but now it had a sharp, focused edge. It was turning into something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like fuel. I sat in his office chair, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, and for the first time since finding the note, I allowed myself to cry. Not for him, for the woman I'd been yesterday morning, making coffee for a husband who was already gone. 4 days after I found the note, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jim standing next to a petite brunette who could only be Monica. She had her hand possessively on his arm, wearing a confident smile that faltered when she saw me looking. I opened the door but kept the security chain on. Yes? Jim's expression was a mix of guilt and defiance. Becca, we need to talk. This has all been a huge misunderstanding. I'm talking to my attorney, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. You should get one too. Monica stepped forward, her voice artificially sweet. Rebecca, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Jim's been so unhappy, and as someone who cares about his well-being, you're trespassing, I cut her off. Both of you. Jim's face flushed. This is my house, Becca. I just need to get my things and we can work this out like adults. The kids need their father. Your things will be handled through our attorneys, I said flatly. Besides, the locks were changed yesterday. The confidence drained from both their faces. Jim sputtered. You can't just lock me out of my own house. You abandoned the marital residence, I replied, using Patricia's exact words. You have no legal right to be here. Monica's mask slipped entirely. Look, this doesn't have to be ugly. Jim loves his kids. He just needs space to figure things out. The audacity was breathtaking. Here was the woman who'd helped destroy my marriage, standing on my doorstep, lecturing me about my children's well-being. Then he should have thought about that before he chose to blow up their family. I closed the door and activated the security system. They stood outside arguing for 10 minutes before driving away. Through the window, I watched Monica's animated gestures as she berated Jim, her sweet facade completely gone. That night, I installed a doorbell camera and changed the garage code. Then I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried until my chest ached. Patricia Wells was everything I'd hoped for. Sharp, experienced, and utterly unimpressed by Jim's dramatics. Her strategy was methodical. Document everything, secure the children's stability, and let Jim's own actions speak for themselves. The evidence is overwhelming, she said during our second meeting, spreading the printed emails across her conference table. Jim's workplace emails, subpoenaed by the court, reveal a 6-month affair timeline. Personal messages sent on company equipment, vacation requests that coincided with hotel, stays, and Monica's transfer request to work more closely with the sales team. I studied the documents, each one a small knife twist. There was the email where he'd called me suffocating and complained about my constant hovering. Another where Monica had sent him photos from a weekend getaway, captioned, "Wish you were here instead of dealing with domestic drama." Domestic drama. That's what our 13-year marriage had been reduced to. Meanwhile, my daily routine became a careful balance of normalcy for the kids and strategic preparation for legal war. School pickup, homework help, dinner, bedtime stories, all while building spreadsheets of financial misconduct and documenting Jim's sporadic, increasingly desperate attempts at contact. The hardest part was watching my children process their father's abandonment. Max, normally sunny and talkative, became withdrawn. He started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 5. During our first family therapy session, he asked Dr. Martinez, "Did Daddy leave because I'm not good at baseball?" The question broke my heart in ways Jim's note never could. Lily's response was different. She became fiercely protective of our new normal. When Jim finally called to talk to the kids, she listened for exactly 3 minutes before hanging up. "He sounds fake," she told me matter-of-factly. Like when he used to promise to come to my piano recitals but never did. The Soccer Mom WhatsApp group became an unexpected battleground. Some rallied around me with meal trains and offers to carpool. Others whispered that I must have driven him away, that marriages don't just explode without warning. The worst was Jennifer Hamilton, who actually suggested I was being vindictive by not working harder to save the marriage. But my fiercest advocate was Linda Martinez, whose own husband had cheated 2 years prior. "Trust me," she messaged privately. "Staying strong now saves you years of regret later. Don't let anyone guilt you into taking him back." The Phoenix Rising Moms online group became my lifeline. Divorced women from across the country sharing practical advice, how to refinance a mortgage solo, which therapy approaches worked best for kids, how to rebuild professional networks after years of being just a mom. Sarah Peterson, a local member, met me for coffee. She'd been where I was 3 years ago. "The first 6 months are survival mode," she said. "But watch, by month 10, you'll remember who you used to be." She was right. Cleaning out the garage to make space for a home office, I found my old art supplies, carefully packed away in boxes Jim had labeled basement storage. I'd been a successful graphic designer before the kids. He'd slowly convinced me that freelance work was too stressful, and I should focus on family. "You're so much better at the domestic stuff than I am," he used to say. "Why stress yourself with deadlines and difficult clients when you could be here for the kids?" I'd believed him. I'd thought I was making a noble sacrifice. That weekend, while the kids played at Anne's house, I set up an easel in the garage. The first brushstroke felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. I painted until my back ached, covering the canvas with bold strokes of blue and gold, colors Jim had always said were too aggressive for our home decor. When Lily and Max came home and saw the painting, their faces lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before the note. "Mom, you're really good at this," Max said, genuinely impressed. "Why don't you do this all the time?" Why, indeed? My graphic design business launched with ironic symmetry. Patricia needed marketing materials for her law firm expansion. "I believe in supporting women rebuilding their lives," she said, handing me my first check in 5 years. Word spread through the mom network faster than I'd expected. Logo designs for small businesses, website graphics for startups, social media packages for local restaurants. Within 2 months, I had 3 steady retainer clients. By month 4, I was approaching my old corporate salary level, something I hadn't dared hope for so quickly. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching myself remember who I'd been before I became Jim's wife. Every completed project felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity he'd convinced me to abandon. Jim's visitation requests were sporadic and often canceled last minute. The court-mandated supervision meant he had to meet the kids at a family center downtown, a sterile room with toys that looked like they belonged in a doctor's office. Max would return from these visits quiet and subdued. Lily stopped asking when the next one would be. "Daddy keeps talking about Monica," Lily told me after one particularly awkward visit. "He says she makes him happy in ways we couldn't understand." "What does that mean?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I knelt down to her eye level. "It means Daddy is making choices that have nothing to do with you or Max. You are both perfect exactly as you are." Monica's presence in their lives became increasingly intrusive. She'd started sending the kids gifts, expensive toys with notes signed "Love Monica," that felt more like territorial markings than genuine affection. When Max's birthday approached, she sent an elaborate Lego set with a card that read, "Can't wait to celebrate with you soon." I threw the gift in our donation pile and explained to Max that gifts from adults we didn't know well weren't appropriate to keep. His relief was palpable. "I didn't really want it anyway," he admitted. "It felt weird." The divorce proceedings moved with agonizing slowness. Discovery phase stretched for months as Patricia's team meticulously documented Jim's financial misconduct. Beyond the obvious affair expenses, they'd found evidence of hidden bonuses, unreported freelance income, and a secret credit card he'd been using to fund his double life. "He's been planning this for longer than you might realize," Patricia explained during one of our strategy sessions. "The financial patterns suggest at least 8 months of preparation. This wasn't a sudden midlife crisis, it was a calculated exit strategy." The betrayal felt fresh all over again. While I'd been trying to be a better wife, packing his lunches and supporting his career moves, he'd been systematically preparing to abandon us. During this period, I had my worst night since finding the note. It was a Tuesday in month 6, and I'd spent the day dealing with Jim's lawyer's demands for reasonable asset division, as if there was anything reasonable about a man who'd stolen thousands of dollars to fund an affair while claiming we couldn't afford family vacations. After putting the kids to bed, I sat in our empty bedroom and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd lost. Not just Jim, though that grief was real, but the future I'd imagined. The 25th anniversary we'd never celebrate. The dream of grandchildren who would never know their grandfather as anything but the man who abandoned their parent. I called my sister at 11 p.m., sobbing so hard I could barely speak. Anne drove over in her pajamas and held me while I grieved not just the marriage, but the naive woman who'd believed love was enough to keep someone from walking away. "You're allowed to be devastated," Anne said, stroking my hair like she had when we were children. "You're also allowed to be furious, but don't let either feeling convince you that you could have prevented this. This was his choice." The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter somehow. The grief was still there, but it no longer felt like it was drowning me. By month 7, Monica had apparently grown tired of sudden stepmother duties and the complexity of dating a man in the middle of a contentious divorce. According to Linda Martinez, whose husband worked in Jim's department, the office romance had become a source of constant HR complaints and professional embarrassment. "They were both passed over for the promotions they were expecting," Linda reported during our weekly coffee meetup. "Senior management doesn't appreciate employees who create workplace drama and air their personal business all over the office." The final nail in their relationship coffin came when Monica received a transfer offer to the company's Denver office. According to office gossip, she took it without consulting Jim. He spent a week calling in sick to work, presumably trying to convince her to stay. She left anyway. Jim's attempts to reconcile intensified after Monica's departure. Flowers appeared on my doorstep, with cards full of empty apologies. He started showing up to the kids' school events, playing the role of the devoted father he'd never actually been. During Lily's school play, he tried to sit next to me, forcing me to move to maintain appropriate boundaries. "I made a mistake," he whispered, as I gathered my purse. "She meant nothing. We can fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He appeared smaller somehow, diminished. The confident man who'd written that cold note had been replaced by someone desperate and grasping. "You didn't make a mistake, Jim," I said quietly. "You made a series of deliberate choices for months. The only mistake was mine. believing you when you said you loved us." His face crumpled, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no lingering love, just the cool indifference of a resolved issue. The settlement negotiations finally began in earnest. Jim's new reality, single income, child support obligations, legal fees, and the professional fallout from his affair had significantly weakened his negotiating position. Patricia presented our case with cold, undeniable facts: documented infidelity, financial misconduct, abandonment of parental responsibilities, and the children's clear preference for stability with their mother. The court tends to favor parents who prioritize their children's well-being over their own romantic impulses, Patricia explained to Jim's lawyer, her tone perfectly professional and utterly devastating. The final settlement awarded me primary custody, the house, and 60% of our combined assets. Jim's weekend visitation would remain supervised until he could demonstrate housing and emotional stability. Child support was calculated on his full income, including the bonuses he'd tried to hide. Walking out of the courthouse after signing the papers, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: genuine peace. 10 months after finding the note, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The house that once felt like a stage set for someone else's life had become genuinely ours. I'd painted the family photo wall in the hallway, sage green for calm, sunny yellow for hope. Lily and Max had helped choose the colors, standing back to admire our work with pride. "It looks like our house now, Mom," Lily said, and she was right. Every corner reflected the people we'd become rather than the people we'd pretended to be. My art studio in the converted garage had become the heart of our home. Clients visited for consultations, the kids did homework at my work table, and I rediscovered not just my professional skills, but the creative passion that had once defined me. The woman who'd made coffee for an ungrateful husband felt like someone from another lifetime. The business was thriving beyond my most optimistic projections. I'd hired a part-time assistant and was turning down projects, a problem I'd never imagined having. The financial independence felt intoxicating. For the first time since college, I made decisions based entirely on what I wanted, not what someone else expected of me. Max had stopped wetting the bed 2 months ago. He'd started a new school year with confidence, making friends easily and excelling in art, class. When he brought home a painting of our family, 3 smiling figures standing in front of a yellow house, there was no shadow figure of an absent father. Just us, complete as we were. Lily had become my fierce ally, protective of our new normal in ways that sometimes worried me. When classmates asked about her dad, she'd simply say, "He doesn't live with us anymore," and change the subject. Dr. Martinez assured me this was healthy. Lily was learning to set boundaries and protect her emotional well-being. The kids' relationship with Jim remained complicated. His supervised visits had become more consistent once the divorce was finalized, but they were stilted affairs. Without Monica's influence, he seemed lost, unsure how to relate to children he'd never really known. Max was polite but distant. Lily answered his questions in monosyllables and never volunteered information about our life. "Do you want me to encourage them to be more open with him?" I'd asked Dr. Martinez during one of our sessions. "Children are excellent judges of authenticity," she'd replied. "They're responding to what they observe, not what adults tell them they should feel." The community response had settled into predictable patterns. The soccer moms who'd initially rallied around me remained supportive, while others had quietly distanced themselves. Whether from discomfort with divorce or loyalty to Jim, I neither knew nor cared. My real support network had crystallized around women who understood that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to fight for someone who doesn't want to be kept. Linda Martinez had become a close friend, and Sarah Peterson from Phoenix Rising Moms had introduced me to a whole network of professionally accomplished women who'd rebuilt their lives after betrayal. We met monthly for what we jokingly called Phoenix Dinners, evenings of excellent food, honest conversation, and the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something terrible and discovering you're stronger than you knew. The online community continued to be a source of practical wisdom. When I'd struggled with dating anxiety, the idea of trusting someone new felt impossible. The women there shared strategies that had worked for them. I wasn't ready yet, but I no longer felt like damaged goods. I felt like someone who'd learned valuable lessons about recognizing red flags and maintaining independence. Jim's life, from what I gathered through inevitable social media glimpses and office gossip, had not improved. Monica's departure had left him scrambling to afford his apartment alone. The professional fallout from their affair had stalled his career advancement. According to Linda, he'd gained weight and looked perpetually tired during the rare times he showed up for company events. Last month, I'd received a text from him that read, "Can we talk? I miss our family. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. The kids need both parents together." I stared at it for exactly 10 seconds, then deleted it without responding. The kids needed stability, honesty, and parents who prioritized their well-being over their own drama. They had that with me. Jim would have to prove he could provide it too, and his track record suggested that was unlikely. 2 weeks ago, I'd had a moment that crystallized how completely my perspective had shifted. I was painting in the studio when Lily came home from school, excited about a boy in her class who'd asked her to the spring dance. As she chattered about whether she should say yes, I realized I was navigating this milestone completely alone, and I was perfectly capable of it. For years, I'd believed I needed Jim's input for major parenting decisions. Now I understood that his absence hadn't created a deficit. It had revealed that I'd always been the primary parent. The only difference was that now I received credit for my competence instead of having it minimized. Yesterday morning brought an unexpected validation. I was dropping Max off at school when his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled me aside. "I wanted you to know that Max has shown remarkable resilience this year," she said. "Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. He's one of the happiest, most confident children in my class." I drove home with tears of gratitude in my eyes, not for Jim's absence, but for the clarity it had provided about my own strength. The house no longer felt haunted by the ghost of our former life. The Scandinavian chair Jim had insisted on was gone, replaced by a comfortable reading nook where the kids and I spent Sunday mornings with books and hot chocolate. The kitchen island where I'd found his note now held fresh flowers from my garden and the kids' latest art projects. Some nights, I allow myself to remember the grief of that first week. The woman who stood in a silent kitchen reading a 4-sentence note. I acknowledge her pain, but her pain became fuel for something infinitely better. Jim will likely spend years blaming me for his problems, casting me as the vindictive ex-wife who refused to play the role of the forgiving, waiting woman. He'll never understand that I didn't seek revenge. I simply got out of the way and let the consequences of their choices catch up to them. Freedom, it turns out, was exactly what we all needed.